Dear students present here on site and dear online participants, welcome to this fourth lecture to the lecture series Strengthening EU Environmental Law, Legal Perspectives on Greening Europe. Today the lecture will be delivered by Professor Gyula Bándi, Professor of Environmental Law at the Pázmány Péter Catholic University in Hungary. Professor Bándi contributed to the research handbook on EU environmental law with a chapter on EU environmental law principles, including the concept of sustainable development. But today, Professor Bándi will talk about the rights of future generations. And since Professor Bándi is Ombudsman for Future Generations in Hungary, we very much look forward to his insightful thoughts, not only based on theory, but also practice. Professor Bándi, I invite you to take the floor.
Thank you very much. So many thanks for inviting me to this wonderful lecture series, because I had the opportunity to attend all the previous presentations, which I found very interesting myself, and I'm looking very much forward to the next round of the speakers. So it's a pleasure for me to be with you here and to talk about my very specific subject, which is on the one hand, as Marian mentioned, on the one hand is seemingly theoretical, but on the other hand is very practical at the same time. And that's what I would like to present to you, and I hope with my theoretical and also practical examples you might find it interesting. Let's begin with the outline. As you can see, I would like first to talk about some words about sustainable development and future generations, and also its role within the European community and then EU law. Then also something about the sustainable development and primarily about the sustainable development goals and their likely legal consequences. And at the third time, turning to the future generations issue and provide you a short survey, and then something about concepts and considerations and how the UN is working in that respect. Then how to come closer to the essence of the problem, whether we should talk about rights or preferably obligations. And then I will, in my practical, using my practical side, I also would like to talk about this other future generations institutions and our role somehow, because it might be interesting that there is something like this as not a very protected species at the moment as an ombudsman for future generations in Hungary. So in my presentations, I use two philosophers, as you can see. I have three very good messages of the Calvin and Hobbes. Probably you know them, but I don't know whether it is well known today, but 10, 15 years ago, they liked it very much, but they have very good messages for us, as you can see that one. Looking at the mankind and its activity and its environmental impact and the burden that we put on the environment. So this is my first message to begin with, but I hope it will be more optimistic at the end. When we talk about the sustainable development questions and within this future generations concept, of course we should go through very quickly through the road from the Stockholm 51 years ago, the Stockholm Conference, to the 2015 Sustainable Development Goals. Because if you look at the Stockholm Declaration and the Stockholm Conference, you find nearly everything which could also come up in details later. So the Stockholm conference was a very good summary of the problems and some suggestions for how to make steps forward. And it was relatively more open towards environmental problems than the next UN conferences. As you might remember that for the preparation of the second big conference, the Environment and Development Conference in Rio, this Brundtland Commission has been established, and that was the one which finally formulated the definition of sustainable development, saying, as you can see, that meets the needs of present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. It sounds very easy. So it is seemingly a very clear message, but probably you can realize that practically it is far from being so simple. So no wonder why the Rio conference more than 30 years ago reinforced these things. On the one hand, that human beings are at the center, and then the principle 3, again, this present and future generations needs together. Not too much afterwards that there was a huge report on the legal constituents of what sustainable development should mean for law, and this was how to put these things together. And one of the aspects was, which I emphasized, and several others, but I only also emphasized the right to a healthy environment, which was some additional point to the previous messages. And then I also mentioned the International Law Association, which first in New Delhi and later in Sofia explained this sustainable development vis-a-vis legal consequences, that sustainable development is maturing into a principle of international law. So that is the beginning. And then let's have a look at how it works, because we are talking mostly about European law and how it works in the community and then later on in the EU law. As you can see, and probably you remember that already in the Maastricht Treaty in Article 2, sustainable development has been mentioned as an objective, sustainable and non-inflationary growth respecting the environment. Now and then we turn to the Lisbon Treaty, and we don't go too much into the history. And the Lisbon Treaty, there are several elements which might be taken as basics for the future generations issue. One is that sustainable development of Europe, covering solidarity between generations, then sustainable development of the earth. I already mentioned that the right to environment, and we will see what kind of environment, healthy, safe, sustainable. We will see that there are different names, but we are not going into that details because it's an absolutely different presentation. It was mentioned in Article 6, and then there is the integration question, which we are coming back in some details next. And then the environmental title and this harmonization issue continued from the original Article 100 of the Treaty of Rome. Now it is Article 114. And then comes circular economy, as you also might know, and then currently the Green Deal. Of course, the two are working together. It is not, there is not the individual questions. Let's go to the last year, jump to the last year, and look at the environmental action program of the current environmental action program, the 8th, which is working till 2030. How it is mentioned, whether how does it mention the future generations, and then you can see there are several questions which might be taken into consideration in the preamble, improving the quality of life for current and future generations, and also they speak about resilience and well-being of present and future generations, and joining to the concept presented nearly at the same time by the United Nations, first the Human Rights Council, and then very soon after the adoption of the 8th Action Program by the General Assembly, that there should be a right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment, which is very promising, looking at the past decades when such kind of relatively late innovation could not be done. So that is the 8th Action Program, and when we go into the details a bit, then there are the priority objectives mentioned in Article 2. Is the well-being economy, as you can see, taking into consideration the planetary boundaries, well-being of all people, and prosperity of present and future generations globally, guided by intergenerational responsibility. Intergenerational, as you know, it means the future generations, while the present means the intragenerational responsibility. Of course, the well-being of all people and the generational equity goes in hand, because mankind is not only it does not only mean the present. And again, they underline the importance of the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment internationally. And then we go to the Sustainable Development Goals, a bit jumping back some years, but it is quite important. As you can see, 17 goals and 169 elements attached to these goals. As you can see, and you know them very much, I think there are so many different types of sustainable development goals. No wonder why. And then it's the link between the SDG and the 8th Action Program is that using this kind of as an American student told me that it is like a wedding cake. It looks like a wedding cake. It is the invention of the Stockholm Resilience Center, as it is referred to this fact in the 8th Action Program itself. So somehow reorganizing these 17 Sustainable Development Goals, using some way or another this older concept of 3 main rounds of 3 main circles of sustainable development, that environment or biosphere, society, and economy, and sending the message to everyone and through this kind of picture, or through this kind of wedding cake, is that society is based on biosphere and the economy should work for the society, and then the cooperation is the young couple is at the top. As you can see, this is the 17. So this is the underlining concept, also presented by the 8th Action Program, and that's what we try to look at from legal point of view. If we are looking, and it has been mentioned that I had the pleasure to participate in this book, and then I speak something about this sustainable development as a legal principle. So what are those legal elements and legal considerations or expressed in the Sustainable Development Goals? At the beginning, you can see that there are two elements: intergenerational equity, intragenerational equity, and integration multiplied with integration. But what are those specific elements which are going into that broader aspect? So the first, of course, the right to environment, which can be safe, healthy, sustainable, as you could see, but there are several other ways how we express this content of this right to environment. That's the reason why I'm using it in that formula, because I do not want to put a pressure on anyone about what is their own understanding. Of course, very strongly related to this, the rights of future generations, and also, as it can be seen above, that intragenerational equity. So the current generations. Of course, public participation is usually accepted as a very relevant and important element, legal constituent of sustainable development. Cooperation and cooperative instruments, so which wants to reflect the major problem of interrelationship, that everything, as you might know, that there are several concepts of ecology, for example, saying that, among others, like there is no such thing as free lunch, or that the nature knows better and everything is connected with everything else. Of course, you have to understand it in its own place, so it should not mean much that there is a huge interrelationship for us and within the environment. And then integration, I refer to the 26 years old. Last year we had a conference on this 25th years conference of this Gabčíkovo-Nagymaros case of the International Court of Justice, which was one of the first big cases in connection with sustainable development and environmental protection. And the case itself is rather interesting, and it does not have any strong views, but some elements are very, very important, like this, that what is integration, the need to reconcile economic development with protection of the environment. And this is the concept. It is within the concept of sustainable development. Of course, precautionary principle, which together with scientific uncertainty, because of course precautionary principle means that we should not wait till the negative consequences are absolutely proven, because it's usually too late. And subsidiarity, which we all know, of course, good governance is always included. And something relatively new, because it's coming up in the last decade, I would say, that it is the concept of resilience. So, and I mentioned one good example is that when we are talking about climate change, there are climate mitigation questions and climate adaptation questions, and resilience is rather something which is closer to the adaptation, that to adapt ourselves to the changing circumstances and changing situations. So these are the legal considerations in general. And now again, my good philosophers are coming back to me just to give you some rest from this presentation, that why we say that what might happen in the future. So sorry for this, but I like these fantastic philosophers, if you don't mind. Okay, what is the concept? And the concept of future generations, and now turning to this point more. Sustainable development, again, I repeat what has already been said, that two principles, intergenerational and intragenerational equity. In terms of intergenerational equity and future generations issues, I have to mention the works of Edith Braun-Weiss, Professor Edith Braun-Weiss, who more than 30 years ago made great efforts to explain and express what these future generations issues really mean. And she said that there are three major elements or three major principles which we have to understand. First is that to conserve options, so options for the future. And here I do not want to go too much into details, which is also very interesting, that what future generations exactly mean, whether it is like 7 generations and in fairy tales, that or it is more. Of course, we should not limit ourselves in that respect to some numbers. But the question is that future generations who are, from my perspective, most of you who are listening, compared with me, belong to the future generations. And there are my grandchild, who is only 4 years old, is probably the one who is representing another group of future generations and going on. So they should have the same or at least comparable choice as we have. Maintain the quality comparable to which it has been enjoyed by previous generations. Of course, we know that there are all conceptual things, because practically it's not really possible that we have the same. Therefore, we only say that the quality is comparable to what has been enjoyed by previous generations, because everything has been changed. And when, for example, if I might say, and express the difference, that when I was born, humankind was only 2.5 billion, and you know, today it's a little bit more, so that's a huge difference. And then finally, it's equitable access. For example, one of the best and very probably the most important is the access to potable water supplies, because as you know, there is in the current months there are very important conferences organized by the UN about these water problems and water rights. And quoting the Human Rights Council of Human Rights, that environmental degradation, climate change, and unsustainable development constitute the most pressing and serious threats to the ability of present and future generations to enjoy the right to life. This is very important, because also when you are looking at, if we don't go into that details, of course, about this new General Assembly decision last July, about this right to safe, health, and sustainable environment. It was also mentioned that this is a precondition for all the other rights, because without this you are not able to survive. Okay, how to come closer now to the question of future generations' rights? Shall we express it in a way that we try to push the question how to define the rights of future generations, or it is better if we are talking about the duties of today? I think it was 2 presentations earlier, then it was the question of the duty of state and obligation of the state, which is very much close to this question. I want to quote something about in that respect, which I like very much, the other authors how to how do they express this problem. If we want to talk about the rights of future generations, that we are not doing anything else, but we say to the future about our aspirations. It is very good message, because really you don't know exactly what is the situation 50 years from now. Even we don't know exactly what is in 2050, which is much less, it's much closer. So we don't know exactly what are the conditions. And I like Bosselman's message saying that we only have more or less informed guesses what should be what are the conditions of future generations, living conditions, and what of rights can talk about. So therefore, the reasonable choice is, he says, for a duty to pass on the integrity of the planetary ecosystem as we have inherited it. And also, in another way, when you are looking at even the 8th Action Program and also the taxonomy regulation of the EU, then this is the no harm concept, that what is the minimum is not to cause harm. And then 10 years ago, the UN Secretary General, the Secretary Generals are always working in respect of towards the interests of future generations. He underlined a very simple question, that they are politically powerless. So therefore, it is they cannot express their views. So we have to help the future generations how to express their views, and not to write wonderful papers about what are the possibilities for their rights, because when it is somehow an unlimited work, but it is more concrete when you think about what are the obligations of today. That is respected in this human rights concept. If we look at the 30 years old, it was probably the first big cases in Philippines. It was the miners of Poza about cutting forests, and about the case started in the name of future generations. As you might know, that there are many similar cases have been issued in connection with climate change problems and people's climate case in EU, the how can I say, the Senioren case in Switzerland about the retired ladies. Of course, they are not exactly the future generations issue, but the question is that how to push, how to put an obligation, how to oblige the governments to do something. And this was the first in this Philippines case. The miners' assertion of the right to a sound environmental constitutes at the same time the performance of their obligation to ensure the protection of that right for the generations to come. One also was very clear. I like it very much. That why don't we talk about so much about the future generation, and why the politicians and why the decision makers are not so willing to think about the future generations? First, and I think it's very good summary, the natural human tendency to prefer the immediate to the distant. So we see ourselves now. We don't know exactly who is coming next. What are those preferences? So it's better to look at the current situation. The representatives, I mean the political representatives, should be responsive to their constituents, so who are elected them. The future generations is not in that position. No wonder why in many countries we could face the question of how to provide some rights to also it was in Hungary that it was an idea that those who have 2 or 3 children might have 1 more vote, and things like that. Of course, it failed, but it's a very interesting question how to come closer to this. And democracy is a government pro tempore. So think about it, that how long is the government cycle? Usually it's 4 years, or therefore they do not really think about longer periods than that. And it's not nice for me, but the tendency to favor the older age group. So sorry for that, for the youngsters. So what is the suggestion of Thompson is that to protect future generations, we have to establish institutions to give special attention to the potential. So institutions and some attention. There are some elements of legal institutional support. Maria mentioned that I'm from Catholic University, so I hope you don't mind if I refer to an encyclical of John Paul II, which is very important, and I think it's a very important message that we are the guardians of the environment, or creation as it is, and it's all the same how we call it. And the question, the guardians is all mankind with all generations, and I think it's again a very important basic theoretical concept. But let's go to UN and back again. And I already mentioned what can we do? Minimize harm, doing which benefits both present and future generations. I quote the Hungarian Constitutional Court because it has very good decisions in connection with that kind of issues. For example, talking about the heritage of future generations, and the minimum question, the minimum which we should attain is to use the non-retrogression, so not to step back from the already achieved results. And then recently, again, the UN Secretary General began to focus on, and also the General Assembly in the current term began to focus on the future generations issue, mentioning again that the problem of the being unrepresented, and as a consequence, to try to formulate forums to act, trustees, instruments to how to protect their interests further. It is also from the same message that strengthening the capacities to understand, assess the future, which means long-term thinking, using those kind of elements and integration, subsidiarity, public participation, which I already mentioned as constituents of sustainable development, and also to create some kind of forums which might help to interpret the needs to work as watchdogs, or to work as guardians in some way or another. Again, I am sorry to mention again the Hungarian Constitutional Court, but of course, as you might know, Hungary is not always taken nowadays as the best example. And just recently, as you know, I think it was today, or that the European Parliament could express the problems related to our coming presidency of the EU. You could hear, but the Hungarian Constitutional Court is a forerunner in that respect. So the state should define the legal obligations and how to provide legislative and institutional guarantees. This is a wonderful message. Because that is the most easiest and probably acceptable possibility, how to develop some kind of framework for protecting the interests of future generations. I mentioned the World Future Council. Probably you know about this institution, that they say what kind of features of such an institution should have: long-termism, integration, sustainability goals, having governments and private actors accountable. And they had 5 years ago a leaflet in that respect. What kind of roles a guardian, as they call, a guardian of future generations might have. That it is an ombudsperson, probably it's an interface. Also, it can be an advisory body. They are possible, are not absolutely. They should not be at the same organization, but most preferably it should be as an auditing body. And also in the our common agenda of the United Nations, the Secretary General again said that made some proposals how to come closer to this trusteeship council, futures laboratory, declaration. There are all ongoing projects today. Declaration on future generations, most preferably it will happen at the UN probably this year, and an option of United Nations special envoy to ensure the political and budgetary decisions are in line. By the way, in brackets, I have to mention that the European Ombudsman is now focusing more and more towards that kind of issues, so towards the protection of future generations' interests. Okay, go back to my favorite philosophers. As you can see, the problem is that if you do not want to inherit such words, which the other generations could provide to you, then probably, as you can see, it's too late to get out of it, because we are you are born, it says. I'm sorry for that, but I think that these are not only funny, but very, very deep messages at the same time. Okay, let's go to our example, or not only our example, but I begin with our example and then I try to expand it to a bit. It's very interesting because just 15 years ago, the Ombudsman for Future Generations could begin its activity as an individual ombudsperson. At that time, there were data protection and minority rights and the general ombudsman and this Future Generations Ombudsman, which could, in that way, could stay as an independent ombudsperson for only 4 years. And since 2012, it is they reorganized the whole system, and there is a commissioner for fundamental rights with 2 deputies. One is for the protection of future generations, named as the Ombudsman for Future Generations. At the same time, it's me for the 2nd term, beginning this year, and the other is the protection of national minorities. Why? Because there are also very interesting and very important messages of the new Hungarian fundamental law, beside many other things which a lot of people are not so happy with that. But these messages are very important. There is an Article P which clearly focuses on future generations and speaks about the common heritage of the nation. This is very close to the international law common heritage concept. Then it speaks about the right to physical and mental health, and environmental issues, sustainable development issues are meant as very special tools for these to protect these rights. And there is a individual right for the healthy environment. And this interest of future generations, it covers environmental protection, nature conservation, cultural heritage at the same time. What we are doing, that's the function of the ombudsman. The main function and the main rights are in the hand of the commissioner. As I mentioned, I'm the deputy, but we are having several issues with very interesting questions, which help us to look carefully at the questions of the drafts and having conferences and meetings. I show you how. So there are possibilities of investigating complaints. There, I act a kind of watchdog and warn. Just now, there was unfortunately, there was an act finally adopted on drilling wells without any permission and any notice, which I was struggling against in the last some years with some, sometimes in a winning, sometimes no. It's a losing. Losing position, but we do our best to work, and also we are working together. I'm working together with the expert, water management experts in that specific respect. And then we have regulatory proposals. We might go to the commissioner might go to constitutional court for our proposal. 5 years ago, sorry. It was 5 years ago. It was the drilling well, the wells issue. Now it was 3 years ago the forest legislation, big case in front of the Constitutional Court to protect the forest. We might have the possibility to ask for judicial review of interfere in not we start the case, but we might interfere in these judicial review processes. And in my mind, the most practical and the best option for us is to provide a kind of platform for negotiations. And people like to come to us, NGOs, government stakeholders, professionals, academia, because we offer a kind of absolutely neutral forum for this kind of discussions. And then afterwards I personally issue some guidances and guidance documents how to understand the different problems for the interest of future generations. We are working close. I'm working closer to the National Sustainable Development Council, the National Environmental Protection Council, parliamentary committees, and there is a general awareness raising to send messages. Sometimes media appearances, but it is not the most practical at this time. And we are listed as one of the sustainability institutions of Hungary. What are the tools? We have a joint report. Then there is a possibility to explore systemic programs, to formulate legislative proposals, to issue so-called general opinions, and also so-called public statements in different things in connection with this. Now, I want to, I know I just import this from another presentation. As you can see in the bottom right, there is this network of institutions for future generations. As you can see, it was established 9 years ago, practically initiated by that time Ombudsman for Future Generations of Hungary, and since that time it is working. And this is the project for our renewal of this kind of institution. So just I wanted to say that we are not alone. So there kind of institutions exist or are going to exist somewhere also, some other places also. And this is what I wanted to mention. And as you can see that it was this network, you can find it on the internet if you are interested, is this year decided how to enlarge and expand its vision to other not only institutions but leaders for future generations. The name is also representing how it is expanding. And as a final point, also from that, I'm sorry for that's so small, but otherwise it could not go into one page. As I wanted to show you that these are the current members of this network of institutions of future generations. For some years, it was the Future Generations Commissioner from Wales was the chair. This is a government body. Then we are in Hungary, the Ombudsman for Future Generations, elected by the parliament, so we are responsible for the parliament. In Israel, it is only history because it was a very strong commissioner for 4 years, but it was so strong that after the first round of the government, they changed the law, unfortunately. The current chair is the Gibraltar Commissioner for Sustainable Development and Future Generations. Then in Netherlands, there is a kind of informal ombudsperson for future generations who is working for doing something similar in the Netherlands. There is a Commissioner for Environment and Sustainable Development, Government Commissioner in Canada. In New Zealand, there is a Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment. And last but not least, I might mention as a very interesting example, because they were using our experiences very much, is the UK Office for Environmental Protection. And the history is very interesting because with the Brexit, the environmental lawyers were afraid of, and environmentalists were afraid of losing some control over the activities of the government, because there was the commission as a kind of watchdog, and what happens if it is missing in the future, and therefore they could establish this government office, which has very interesting combination of powers, as you can see, very similar to us, scrutinizing environmental improvement plans, scrutinizing environmental law, advising government, enforcing against the failures to comply with environmental law. And this means that there is an interest and there is a growing tendency of establishing such kind of institutions, which are not necessarily politically powerful, but which has a very good chance to formulate somehow the decision makers' behavior. And that was my presentation. And thank you for your interest.